How about now? Is that good? Okay, great. Thank you all so much for coming. I want to start by saying thank you to the UN, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and the SDG Pavilion for hosting us in this panel, and all of my fellow panelists. Excited that you're all here. So my name is Emma Brace. I'm an assistant professor of human-centered engineering at Boston College. Really excited to have this conversation with all of you today about how we can empower students to be the next generation of climate innovators. And in particular, I think today we want to think about how North American higher education really has a critical role to play in trying to address the climate crisis. And especially thinking about SDG 4, quality higher education, and the obligation to fulfill the Paris Agreement's call to enhance climate change education, training, public awareness, public participation, and access to information. And so I think all of us at our different institutions and in the different roles we have as students and faculty and project partners are both seeing and participating in a variety of new programming, innovation, applied educational experiences, new initiatives that are hopefully preparing students to go out into the world and do work on addressing the climate crisis and help accelerate the just transitions that we need to develop a more sustainable society. If I can, I'll just briefly mention my own. So many initiatives at Boston College, and we have a student from BC on the panel who will share more about some of her experiences. But I wanted to highlight we have a new program, Human-Centered Engineering, that is a new engineering program that strives to put humans and the needs of the planet and people at kind of the heart of engineering, a different way of framing traditional engineering design. So that's something that we're doing, and a tangible way that I see that playing out at BC is I teach engineering thermodynamics, a very traditional technical course, and in my thermodynamics class I talk about the SDGs and what it means for power and electricity and how that comes in. And I can definitely tell you that's not something I saw when I was an engineering student taking thermodynamics. So hopefully we're kind of shifting to thinking about not just technical material, but like what does that mean out in the world, and how do we use our skills to help the planet. So with that, I don't want to take too much time, so I'm going to turn it over to my panelists. I think we can just go down the row, and you each have 5 minutes. Tell us your name, where you're from, and what you're doing.
Great, thanks. So my name is Leah Pohl-Selters. I'm a PhD candidate at Tufts University at the Friedman School, studying agriculture, food, and environment and the way those things interact. And the center that funds my work is the Climate and Health Global Research on Disaster Center, also known as CORD. CORD is a really unique project in that we bring together a consortium of 7 universities to work on different aspects of climate and health. And that can show up in ways like the burden of floods on women and refugees. Some people are looking at soil science and how that interacts with crops and nutrition, and others are working on things like the mental health impacts of drought. So we're working through a lot of different topics together, and through this, we've created what's called the Innovative Leaders Network, which is a PhD cohort of students that are moving through their PhDs together and doing a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration. I think this is a really unique and important way that we can kind of show up for one another, but it's yeah, and it's really improved the quality of our education. And so like on the topic of quality education, I think that the experience has been really transformative for me and Akriti, who's also in the audience here. Yeah, so I'll stop there and then hand it over.
So thanks everyone. I'm Abby Bergman. I am a second-year PhD student at Boston College in the Lynch School of Education and Human Development, where I'm studying formative education. So I'm specifically interested in the design of technologies that empower young children, so pre-K to second grade, that to creatively solve problems that afford opportunities to promote caring, responsibility, and generosity. So I'm part of an NSF-funded project called Early Childhood Maker Literacies, fostering computational thinking among Navajo youth and educators. And so something that's really important to me is the prospect of connecting hands-on, developmentally appropriate, and culturally relevant STEM education, and bringing that to communities, designing those tools with the communities themselves so that they can really be a part of that process. So ultimately, I think accelerating the transition to sustainable society requires reimagining education as a continuum, so not just a series of silos. And so I'm really interested in starting that process early at the early childhood site and thinking about what the role higher education has to play in bringing those solutions there. So I think that as I strive to live this out personally, some of the things that I've been able to take advantage of at BC are taking courses through our consortium related to climate justice and ecofeminism. So I've been able to learn and develop relationships across institutions in the Boston area, which has been like a very great opportunity. And I've also been able to, through my work with the Schiller Institute, which is one of the partners in this presentation here, been able to attend COP. So I really think that the liberal arts institutions have a special role to play in accelerating this transition by bridging insights across both the humanities and sciences. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Eaglin. I'm an associate professor of environmental history at Ohio State University. My individual research focuses on alternative energy development in Brazil. And so I kind of look at the environmental impacts that come along with questions of decarbonization, right? So as we're looking at expanding biofuels, as we're looking at expanding nuclear energy, we also want to take into account what are the environmental costs associated with those, right? And so that we can better approach them as we decarbonize. At Ohio State, I'm also a co-founder of the Environmental History Initiative, in which we are focused on training our next generation of sustainability experts. And so how have we shaped that? We have the largest contingent of environmental historians in the country, in the United States, at Ohio State. And so we tried to really kind of reimagine this as a strength that we can bring to students to help inform, to bring a historical perspective to future policy development by training the next generation in this policy history. So one of the big initiatives, I brought my own ringer over here, but we have brought students to COP through a class on the politics of climate change. And so we bring 10 students every year we do a whole class where we're kind of historicizing COP. And then we're also trying to meet students where they're at. What really drives them? What are the questions that they're interested in? Then we get to COP. They get to follow some of the specific interests that they've been researching throughout the semester. And then one of the final projects is that everybody has to write an op-ed. And so how is that an important step, right? That is also starting to, one, validate their own opinions in a policy discussion, right? Learning how to say, I have an opinion, I have an informed opinion, right? And so that they can actually start to envision themselves as sustainability experts. It also gives them professional experience, so that's as we say, put that on your CV everywhere, right? Because this is a really unique experience that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to experience, right? And certainly not in college. And so this is also giving them a foot up in their hopefully professional trajectory toward climate issues. And then I also think that for some students, we always try and make sure we bring at least one or two students that have never been outside the United States. It's an opportunity to think about climate issues outside of a siloed perspective within your own country. And certainly as we look at the political arena in the United States today, as we've pulled out of the parties, it's even more important to bring students to these discussions because it's harder to access these in the United States. So these are some of the examples. I mean, we have a bevy of other programs that I'd be more than happy to talk about, but I will not hold the mic. And so, but these are some of the ways that we're trying to engage students early in making them, climate engaged.
So hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Paola Visconti. I am the Director of Sustainability and Social Impact at Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is a private nonprofit university in Mexico. We are one of the largest universities, private universities in the country. We have about 80,000 students. We have 20 campuses that are distributed throughout the country from the south, central, north part of the country. We have also a high school system. So we have high schools, undergrad, and postgraduate education as well. And some of the roles that I have, or some of the responsibilities that I hold within this, the Office of Sustainability and Social Impact, is our sustainability plan. So in 2021, Tec de Monterrey, well, in 2019, we signed our Race to Zero commitment to be net zero before 2040. And with that commitment came like a bunch of other stuff, right? It's not only being net zero, but then as a university, what is our role in climate action? So definitely being a more sustainable university in our operations, which is a basic thing, but it's also how do we incorporate this into our curriculum? How do we empower students and engage with them more outside of the classroom? How do we collaborate with other universities and other networks in other spaces such as COP? So after 2019, we developed and published our Sustainability and Climate Change Plan that has led our efforts until today. Right now, we're actually drafting our sustainability plan for 2030. So our goals were set for 2025, and now we're developing our new strategic plan for 2030, which is exciting and scary at the same time. But in terms of what some of the things that we've done is, in terms of student engagement, is we've done a lot of work in terms of the curriculum. How do we make sure that all students have the opportunity to learn but experience climate change related topics and sustainability, like the whole SDGs basically, through education for sustainable development, regardless what you're studying. If you're an engineer, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a doctor, in all of our study plans, education for sustainable development is embedded. It's about 20 to 30% of our curriculum for undergrad. Postgrad, we also have some master programs in energy, a business and sustainability plan. So we've done a lot of stuff in terms of the curriculum. We've also tried to engage students outside of the classroom in student groups. We have a very specific student group for sustainability, and then we've also brought students here to COP. I can talk more about any of those things in the following questions.
Thank you. Thanks for the host. Thanks for the invite. My name is Ellie Johnston. I'm the Director of Programs at Climate Interactive. And as a testament to what Jennifer is talking about of bringing students to COP, my very first COP was many, many years ago. My university didn't have a student delegation, but I got involved with a nonprofit and went to COP. And many years later, 8 COPs later, here I am still showing up to these darn things and trying to, move things forward. My experience with sustainability in higher education also goes back 15 years. And so it's a question I've been thinking a lot about for a while. And what we do at Climate Interactive is, and I'm here because we also work in collaboration with MIT. We have a project together called the MIT Climate Pathways Initiative. And through that, we develop both simulators and experiences to use the simulators. So one of our most well-known simulators is called En-ROADS. And what it is it's a tool that enables you to look at what it takes to achieve the Paris targets. It's a free tool. It's available in over 20 languages, and it's been used by over 1.3 million people. I see some knowing nods in the audience. Great to see. Love to find Inroads fans among us. And with that tool, we have seen a huge amount of interest and use in higher education. So I know our assessments are undercounting it, but as far as we know, there are 130 institutions worldwide that have embedded this tool into their curriculum. It's through different kinds of experiences. This ranges from a homework exercise where people can play out and create their own scenarios and say, okay, how do we achieve these Paris targets? What do the reductions look like? What is that suite of different types of technologies, policies, and actions that will really drive the difference and transition away from fossil fuels at what speed? What are some of those dynamics with the climate system that we can explore? And so that looks like a homework exercise, or we have workshop formats. We also have a role-playing game where people can play different stakeholders. Some of those stakeholders represented in the halls here of private interests, government negotiators, and then students then play those roles to the best of their ability and say, okay, if I was in these shoes, what would I be advocating for in a global climate conversation? And it's that immersive experience that taps into what evidence and lots of research has shown that is like that experiential learning. You're not only engaging, kind of your intellect, but you also can, a lot of times we see people get very emotionally invested. It's fun, people are arguing, but all of a sudden they've found some passion for some position they didn't know they cared about, or just pretending just for the point of a class. And to really like drive home, and our intuition for a long time was that this is something that works. But we've backed that up with research. And so we've had a number of papers on the type of tools, these role-playing games, these simulation experiences to say, okay, is this an effective way of engaging people around climate change? Just last month, our collaborators at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, others at MIT Sloan, and our group looked at what that impact is in terms of learning outcomes, and saw that there is a substantial, people remember the exercise long after. You can't necessarily place that one PowerPoint presentation on that one climate policy topic maybe in your memory, but if your professor asked you to play a role and you had to like do something that was a little unconventional, people remember that. And it also then, we are seeing evidence too that it leads to career choices, it leads towards people choosing pathways in terms of the majors that they select, as well as action beyond the classroom. And that's kind of my final point, which is that as I think about like the role of higher education in playing in terms of climate change, I'm always looking for that way of how can we scale this? Because time is of the essence. And so, reaching 133 universities is great, but we need to go so much bigger. And how do we create collaborations to find what works and go bigger? But then beyond that, how do we get beyond academia to engage with these decision makers? So like the idea of the op-eds, or finding ways in which both as professors and researchers, as well as encouraging students to get out beyond the classroom, engage communities. We've seen cases where people have taken our tool and then students have trained themselves in how to run it and then gone to other schools, like gone from a university to a high school and said, okay, now let's run exercises for high school students to accelerate that learning more and more. Happy to go into deeper into any of those topics, but I'll hand the mic off. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me on the panel, and thank you so much, Ellie, for basically doing a lot of the hard work that I was going to do. Because I'm a master's student at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, also at Tufts University. I have used En-ROADS in my classrooms, and I am a member of the Climate Policy Lab, where I have worked with Travis Frank and the Energy Policy Simulator. So that's a part of my bio that you have already covered, and I don't have to do any more on that. The second half of my bio that is relevant to what I want to talk about is my experience as a debater. So I have been competing I did the math to submit to this panel. It's been 12 years, which is crazy. I'm 23, so that's the majority of my life, which is crazy. But I have had the joy to travel across the world. I've been the chief adjudicator of the Canadian British Parliamentary Debate Championships. And as a part of the learning process of that, I have also been a coach at Speechtopia Education as a debate instructor for 5 years now. This is my 5th year there. And debate is one of those tools which engages students in those passions and develops the kind of enthusiasm that you were talking about, Ellie. For those who don't know, debate is a speech activity. You are given a topic, you are given a side, you are given 15 minutes usually, and then you just go, and you have to talk. And you don't really get a ton of autonomy in that, which is something that a lot of people struggle to grapple with at first, and they don't like it, and then they enjoy it. And so, to kind of put that activity in the terms that we use, I think there's 3 kind of components to this. The first is just the instruction and the high school level stuff. The second is the kind of higher level competitions that you see. And the third is the kind of in-institution club activities. And the beauty of debating is it's an activity that is uniquely run by university students. So even at the high school level, teachers are somewhat involved, but it's really because university students are at the forefront of, actually doing it and being practitioners, they're often the coaches, they're often the ones leading the charge for high schoolers as well. So to put this in SDG terms, I want to talk about first knowledge transfer and then knowledge production. So in terms of knowledge transfer, this is where I draw on my coaching activities here, because this is where you get a lot of that engagement for high school students who wouldn't necessarily see climate change or who wouldn't necessarily see a lot of these kind of debating. It draws a lot of international relations folks, so those types of issues as well. And even in my experience, I remember this year I led a lesson on ecosystem services and payments for ecosystem services, and then made my students do a debate about pesticides. And they asked me several questions after, which is either a sign I'm doing a bad job and they have questions to ask, or they're very interested in the topic now and they weren't before. So that to me is really rewarding, to get people interested in things they wouldn't have otherwise been. But then in terms of knowledge production, and I think you did a great job of covering a lot of this already, when you talk about something you don't necessarily agree with and you're assigned to something you don't like, the first round of the European Debate Championships, I don't even know how many years ago, was should we ban zoos, right? And I mean, especially at a climate COP, people are going to have very strong opinions that you may be put on the side you don't agree with. And I think that creates a different type of learning, a different type of engagement that you wouldn't otherwise see. But I think the second piece is just talking about topics and you may not have any knowledge because you're not allowed to use the internet. So, if you're in a debate about carbon markets and you don't know what a carbon market is, you got to figure it out. And you do a lot of learning in the process of just 15 minutes and then over the course of that debate round. So I think that is a really powerful tool for learning, even if it's through, force. Even for me, as I lead to my environmental policy, studies at the Fletcher School, debating was that kind of avenue for me because it was in engaging the intersection of environmental and international relations issues that led me to my degree in the first place. So even just speaking from a personal sense, a lot of the topics I covered, a lot of the teachers I had really led me to this passion. So thank you so much. I look forward to all your questions.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. So I think I'll start with a few questions for everyone, and then after that, take questions from the audience. We're doing great on time, so plenty of time to answer. So I think the first question I want to ask is if anybody wants to expand on or tell us about what kind of innovative programming or specific educational experiences you're seeing in your programs that are preparing students to be climate innovators post-grad. And we can use that second microphone too.
Well, all right. So as noted, I talked about the politics of climate change class, but we're actually still expanding out beyond that specific class And I would highlight that one of the things that we're also trying to do while we're at COP is find connections with other universities, with other companies, so that we're also trying to kind of funnel a lot of our students into internships. And I actually love the comment about debate, because while my students loathe me for it, I always require presentations at the end of the semester, because learning how to present yourself and present your position is a critical part of policy, of being able to be an engaged policy member, right? And so also learning how to be a professional is one of the things that we hope you find through an internship, right? And so trying to connect the classroom activities to professional opportunities of the paid and unpaid variety, but also on our part, for the professors / co-directors, we're out there hustling up funding so that perhaps the company doesn't have to pay them, because we can find ways to subsidize student participation. We subsidize heavily participation to come to COP, so that participation is not dependent on your economic capabilities. And these are all things that I think are essential to diversifying and equalizing participation in our climate future.
Well, I guess I can speak to two things that I think is very similar to what you're talking about finding partners outside of the university. So one of the distinct characteristics of the educational model at Tec de Monterrey for undergraduate students is that we have, in Spanish it's called socioformadores, which is like learning partners, I guess. So a lot of the courses have a challenge. And this challenge is a challenge-based model, is a competency-based learning model as well. So most of the courses have a challenge the students have to tackle. And this challenge is placed and submitted by socios formadores, by our learning partners, which is basically companies, NGOs, or governments that present a challenge to the students, and then the students have to go about in a different way, innovative way of presenting a solution to that challenge to the socio formador or our learning partner. And this may lead to that innovation being implemented, it may not. But the thing is that you're putting students in a context of real world problems, and most of the time they have to go out into the community or in the business or the industry to learn more about it and have these real contact outside of the classroom, and then come back and just think of different ways of doing that. So that's and that is done in not only in sustainability, but in every other aspect of whatever the students are studying. That is our approach to our learning model at Tec de Monterrey. Specifically to our sustainability plan, I think one of the things that we've tried to do, because we're such a big university with many thousands of students, what we've tried to do in order to get students more engaged inside their campus is that we have 2 students that are, I don't know if I want to call them delegates, but they're like, Ruta Azul is what we call our sustainability plan. So we have a student committee for the sustainability plan for Ruta Azul. So it's 2 students per campus, and we get them linked to the sustainability committee that we have in each campus. The sustainability committee in the campus is led by the director of the campus, but it also has people from the physical plant, from the people that do all the water, the energy, the waste management, but it also has academics. It also has the people from the campus that do the relationships with the community. So we try to get students inside that committee so that they can have an opinion, so that they can also hear, because sometimes we hear like, oh, the campus is not doing anything for sustainability. So we try to get them in that committee so that they can hear all of the things that we're doing, and if they have anything to propose, that they're in the correct place where they can make those proposals. Not everything that they propose can happen, because running a campus is complicated, but having that engagement between the faculty, the operations of the campus, and the students, we believe that it can also lead to a lot of innovations inside and outside the classroom as well.
To build on the question of like how can we foster climate innovators, one of the things that we have built out is this program we call the Inroads Climate Ambassadors. And honestly, when we conceived of it, I had no idea that it would take off in the ways that it has. And what this is that we have lots of people engaging with our tools, but there are people that then are like saying, well, what's next, or what more, or how can I go deeper into this? And then we have built out a training program for which people can take it, become much more familiar with our model Inroads and all the different dynamics of it, as well as on facilitation techniques for how to lead these different kinds of experiences I spoke to, role-playing games, workshops, that kind of thing. And then to become an Inroads Climate Ambassador, you must run 2 events with the simulator, with whatever audience you have out in the world. And then to maintain that credential, you have to run 2 events each year subsequently. And we've seen people leverage that on their LinkedIn profiles and on their resumes as a way of signaling, like, I have gone deep into this topic of climate change. We know, while we've known about climate change for some time, curriculums are still catching up in terms of the availability of different kinds of offerings. Mid-career professionals are pivoting into climate careers and are trying to make that jump, say, okay, I'm passionate about sustainability, I'm passionate about climate change, how can I do that? And so actually a person on my team, she leads our partnerships, she came out of accounting, Big 4 accounting firm, and she took our course, became an Inroads Climate Ambassador, and was doing this in California. She found opportunities to be an adjunct professor, guest lecturer, and was using the simulator in lots of different ways as a way to set up her career pivot out of accounting into climate sustainability. Now, it's really interesting because she's actually going back to accounting because the entire accounting professional is starting to pick up on this climate thing as disclosures become more and more important. And so she can bring that sweet spot of 2 different expertise. And that's really what's going to set students, professionals, everyone out in the years to come. It's like, okay, how do you set yourself apart? Be well versed in 2 different fields that you can then bring together to make yourself stand out.
On the vein of bringing together different expertise, one of the major goals of the PhD cohort that I mentioned before is to bring together people from different cultures and different areas of study. So for example, my own research is based in Namibia, and I work with the University of Namibia and a PhD student there. We've co-designed our data collection. It's a survey. I'm able to kind of see through his lens of what the on-the-ground situation is in Namibia, but conversely, he is able to bring a lot from the U.S. into different forms of and examples of psychosocial support for drought and poverty-related burdens. And this is happening in partners throughout the cohort. So there are around 10 of us who are active across 4 universities in Africa, 2 in Asia, and then Tufts. And it's, for us, kind of a proof of concept of what education could look like if we were to break down some of the disciplinary barriers and some of the cultural barriers that we currently see.
I like that you brought up the co-design piece and how to integrate this into the research process as well, and that's definitely something that I think about a lot. In terms of my research, it's not explicitly climate focused, but it happens to be a really great spot to bring that focus in very naturally, in teaching young children about what a variable is and what data collection is. Like they want to know about the environment and they want to know about the world around them, and it's a very natural way to show them, like, you want to learn about the sun, let's talk about it. And so that's been a really exciting piece too, and also the ways to bring technology kind of down to the level of the people in terms of bringing it to what's already available, what's already familiar to them, skills that are already in their communities as well. So it's really about like learning from them about how to translate what we do into what they're already doing, and to bridge those differences, I think, is all very related to this work.
And just last word, I know this question was about programs, but I think the power of friendship should not be underestimated here. And especially as we're talking about all these cross-cultural connections, I mean, North American education already has students from every populated continent. But even beyond that, I can speak to debating as an opportunity and a venue to bring together people from all the populated continents. I mean, I've competed against people from every school on this panel, and I've adjudicated people from schools on all the 6 continents, right? So I think that I agree with everyone is the moral of the story.
Yeah, thank you all for your really thoughtful answers. I love hearing what other people are doing. I think, let's take audience questions. Anybody have one?
Hi, Valeria Soto from Tec de Monterrey. This is a question about imagination. If you could design a program and you didn't have any restriction or barriers, which program would you develop in your university?
I can answer that very quickly because I think I'm doing it, right? I think we came up with this environmental history initiative maybe 3 years ago, and have 4 years ago, and started doing a lot of fundraising to try and get to do the programs that we want to do. I think that it's been awesome to see how positively students have responded to it, and it's given us the opportunity to expand out our course offering. So another, I guess, which goes back to the last question, but like we're also going to add classes on field schools where we basically do environmental histories of, I mean, especially on the one hand we have this international trip to the COP. But also when we talk about a lot of students have never been to the national parks in the United States, right? A lot of American students have never been to the national parks in the United States, and we're setting up field schools to visit some of those and add kind of environmental histories and indigenous histories that give a longue durée history of what is this space and why do we also want to fight to protect it, right? I think that in the future, I'm starting to put together another class to go to specifically to energy conferences, right? As we have a lot of students involved with these things, and so we're kind of early enough on that we haven't been jaded yet by all the things that we can't find enough money for. But I think it's also climate issues touch everything, and this is so much of what we're talking about at COP, like. The great expanse, this is something that everybody's experiencing, and it is a crisis. It is also a crisis, as noted, that academia has not caught up with in a lot of ways, right? We don't see, we see a demand by students that is pushing for more courses, more professionalization. We see moving from industry into climate issues because we are all calling out for this, right? And I think that this is also to the broader theme, the way that we are in this position to innovate and imagine and quickly see that we should dream bigger because this demand is unlimited. This interest is unlimited on campus, and it is truly limited by funding from our universities. But we keep pushing on that and actually finding partners outside of academia to keep doing these things, because often when you go to your administrators and say, I found some other funding, they're like, you know what, you can do that. I think we will take that money, right? So so being positive about it has been really exciting.
Something that I think about is like a mentorship process between young children in the communities around an institution and professors and researchers partnering in an inquiry process together would be what I would propose. I think it would be a very, like, I'm curious about like what mutual experience that would be for professors to kind of move through an inquiry experience with a child and really pursue that question with them, as well as what they could learn from seeing like an expert in something really take on that beginner mindset of like, here's how I would pursue this question and how to the knowledge generation process happens.
Thank you. That was a great question. I love it. And I just want to highlight some of the programs that have gone on this panel already. Like, I want to take your class, Jennifer. That sounds amazing. But I was reading something actually on the flight here about a study where they were trying to assess the first mover problem and the free driver problem in geoengineering. And the way they went about doing it is they built a simulation, which I would like to do and I would like to be a part of. And the way they designed it is they said, here's the desired warming that is best for your economic conditions. Here's the resources you have. Do you put them into mitigation? Do you put them into adaptation? Or do you put them into geoengineering and solar radiation management? And it's designed as research, so obviously it's very blind and they have very rigorous methods and no one can talk to each other. But and this is something that is very feasible to organize and do, and I need to talk to the other people at Tufts before I go ahead and commit to doing it. But this is something that I would have loved to be a part of that study and play, and I see it as a game more than as research. Yeah, I thought that was cool and wanted to share.
So, yeah, again, thanks for the question. It was great. If I imagine like what I would build if I didn't have limits, I think about how so many of the sustainability climate education efforts today are kind of opt-in, right? Like, it's the students that are already passionate that sign up for the classes. And we know this challenge is not this kind of niche thing that you can pocket over here in this department, but is something very systemic that impacts everyone and touches every different kind of discipline. So I'm thinking about like, okay, how then do we reach across all the disciplines? And we see different kinds of programs adopted by different universities, sustainability requirements. You mentioned, 20+% of the curriculum has sustainability in it. That's phenomenal. One thing we got the opportunity to do this year, which was amazing, was at MIT, every first-year student, as well as every incoming MBA student, got the opportunity to go through our simulation experience. That was over 1,000 students across all different kinds of MIT majors, disciplines, many of them just out of high school. It's that first week of college. You're learning, you're absorbing so much, those decisions and that exposure. They have these studies about the people you meet your first week of college. More often than not, sometimes you know them decades later. You know that college roommate. You remember that first year orientation experience, whatever that may be. So how can we get climate simulations, experiences into those orientations so that every college student kicks off their college career? We know you got to go deep in all the different disciplines, but they have some kind of a framework of sustainability and this climate situation that our world is catapulting into to contextualize their work. And so it's not done in absence of, this world that we live in.
And I think I totally agree with you. And of course, in terms of the interdisciplinarity that is needed to advance, and I don't think it's yet fully recognized within the university and the academia that it is not just for engineers to do energy things and for lawyers to do, lawyer stuff, but it's how do you incorporate everything into every decision that you have to make in order for us to just achieve our goals. But something else in terms of universities, something that it's a really big challenge for us is that now we've incorporated it, sustainability education for sustainable development in about 20% of our curriculum. But now we have to train the teachers. So it's in the curriculum, right? And we're telling them that they have to, across 3 dimensions, which is the social emotional dimension, the knowledge, and the conductual, and the students have to learn, but they have to experience and they have to feel. But then how do we make sure that the person that's in the classroom, if it's an engineer, if it's a PhD with an engineering background, and we're asking him to incorporate education for sustainable development into his course, then what tools do we have to give that person in order for that to actually accomplish what we want to accomplish? I think teacher training is really important, and it's a big challenge because it's a lot of teachers and they don't necessarily have a sustainability background, or that maybe they don't see that it's necessary to have this interdisciplinarity. So it's a big challenge. So if I could wish for something, is just to have the resources to come up with maybe like an En-ROADS for teachers. Like, how do you have simulations for teachers that before they go into the classroom, they get to experience something? I don't know. I don't have like a clear way of getting about that, but it is a big challenge that we have that we're working through right now.
I agree. Great question. And with all the programs that have already been kind of discussed, I also want to take your class. Like, this all sounds amazing. But one thing I think about when I'm thinking of quality education is that education is for everyone, and everyone has something to add to our education, and we don't really leave academia enough with that. So I think I would build a program where we're leaving the ivory tower, we're taking the lessons that we've learned to communities and kind of reflecting back if that fits for their situations and scenarios, and if it's feasible for their own lifestyles. So I think that's kind of where I would go with this.
I love that question. Thank you so much. My mind is just like buzzing with ideas. That was wonderful. And thank you all for your answers. Do we have another audience question? Yes.
Good morning. My name is Karina. I am from Brazil, and I am professor at a large public medical school in São Paulo State. And I have already implemented a course of climate change and planetary health for all students in medicine, nurse, and nutrition. But this is the first in Brazil. And I would like to know what you all suggest and the way you can suggest for countries like Brazil to implement this teaching in university with so many vulnerabilities and inequalities.
Great question. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, so I think for teacher training, well, for recommendations, I think what we have done, try to do, not there yet, but at Tec de Monterrey, we have 6 national schools, right? So we have business, engineering, social sciences, humanities, business, I've already said. So what we've done is partner with each of the deans of the schools in order to, try to come up with a way to make sure that teachers can access training. And what we do is, because I am in the central office at the university, right? So I'm not in any school. So partnering and identifying those key stakeholders in the university is really important. And then addressing, like, maybe what is the biggest issue that you want to tackle, if it's sustainability as a whole, if it's something very specific that you want to talk about, you talk about nutrition and health. Medicine, yeah. So we've worked with our medicine school as well. And it's really interesting because at the beginning it was like, they told us, we have this course that is on molecular something, and that is a course that every med student takes. You can do with this course whatever you want. And we were like, how do we embed sustainable development into this course? But it was there, right? So it's like, we got the yes because we just went and knocked on doors for the schools and say, hey, we want to introduce sustainability. Something really important is that we have the support of the rector of the school. So because we signed this commitment and we have this sustainability plan, people kind of have to listen to us. So just, if you have authorities that want to embed sustainability, if you have the people that want to also do it, then it's just knocking on doors, identifying those specific places where you can go and just get your foot in the door, right? I mean, just even if it's not like the best thing in the world or the best program, even if it's just a little bit, just get in there and work with the people to just come up with something that works for you, that works for the university, for the student and the teacher. Because if you are hoping to just have the best teacher training program or the best curriculum, you're probably not going to make it. So I think thinking about just getting your foot in the door, and with this course in our School of Medicine, it was great because it was a collaboration between our office and the School of Medicine, and then now all of the med students in their first semester have this course that touches on, it's a little bit more about air quality, so it's kind of climate change related in a way, and sustainability, and then something about the body and molecular stuff. I don't really know what it is. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's just finding really key stakeholders. They're going to know more about those vulnerabilities and what are the needs. And then you just have to be willing to work with others. And, the small wins, celebrate those very small wins as well.
Yeah, and in terms of resources, so I sit on the side of like a group that develops resources that teachers can use. And so like, for me, I'm like, how do I get on the rooftops and say, and wave my hand and say like, over here, I've got free resources, I've got a free training, because that's what I've got, And it's like, we're a nonprofit, we're supported by private philanthropies, and a lot of our work is motivated by how can we develop tools to support decision makers. So it's not with an education focus that we support ourselves, but we have a philosophy of giving it all away, and making it available for free. And so, and I know that's not a reality. I mean, funding limitations are what they are. It makes the field challenging at times to figure out, okay, how can you make your resource for free? But that's what we've tried to do every step of the way, is just make it available, give people access, develop it in a way that teachers can use it, that it's accessible to anyone, because it turns out if you're designing a tool that's accessible to a parliamentarian or a member of Congress, it's going to be understandable to an undergrad too. And that's kind of my metric, is like, okay, how can this be understandable and clear? And then the tool we have, Inroads, I have been so blown away by the range of disciplines in which it has found a use. So taking, for example, like climate impacts and how we help people think about this challenge of climate change, not just in terms of a temperature number or in terms of emissions, but in terms of impacts on the ground that people experience. We have that. We have added maps so that people can drill down in and look at their specific region and play out scenarios. And then so you think about something like air pollution, and then you see how, oh, wow, taking action on climate change both addresses these climate impacts, but also has this very near-term, very impactful health benefit of reducing particulate matter and that kind of thing. And there are all kinds of overlaps, and I love finding those, like, okay, I've got an art history class. What can I do? How can I bring climate in? And it's like, reach out, find us, because some of us just love, like, putting those puzzle pieces together, like, okay, we can get an art history class to talk about climate change, definitely.
I'm going to speak a little bit more specifically to Brazil. So you are in the interior, or you're in Sao Paulo mesmo? You're in interior. Okay. Because as we all know, Brazil has an incredibly rich, a rich environmental history, and two, a tragic history of inequality, right? And I think that when we talk about climate change, we have so many examples of terrible, terrible events that have happened in the last 2 or 3 years that have dramatically, I think, shifted opinions about climate change in Brazil. So specifically when we're talking about a school on public health and nutrition, and this goes back to the comment about experiential learning, but if I would include a history of, or even a single lecture in any class about a specific area in the city that has been affected by flooding. And every single city in Rio, or not in Rio, but in Brazil has a flooding history, right? You could easily add something about where does waste go in Brazil, right? And this has huge public health implications, and you can add an entire history about how is that also connected to questions of inequality, right? I mean, and then for me, I would do something on rivers, because we certainly don't talk about why, from an environmental history perspective, why do so many cities have flooding issues? It's because of the ways that the locations of cities have been built and the relation to sanitation. I would also, I would do something on Rio Grande do Sul, and these are all ways that you can very quickly, especially after this COP, they're coming out with the Belém Action Plan, which is a model for the world based on some of the disasters that Brazil has had to face in the last couple of years, and how Brazil has had to implement adaptation faster, or in its own unique way that they are now saying is a model for other countries, right? So these are some of the very specific examples that I would give that I think would be an awesome way to kind of engage some of those things in what is the fact that this is the first program in Brazil, right? I mean, this is also an opportunity to shape the way that other schools around Brazil can start implementing and adding these into education, right? So I think it's really exciting.
Okay, we are just about at time, and I have a question I want to end on, so I'm going to ask that as the last question. What gives you hope, or what makes you feel hopeful about the role of higher education in building, hopefully, a more sustainable future?
I think, as we've seen on this panel, there's so many examples of taking academia from a place of where knowledge is being stored to where it's being put into action and disseminated and utilized. And I think I have a lot of hope that the people on this panel and all the people here are going to continue that.
Something that comes to mind for me is just the varied ways that care is shown and developed across the university. I think here we've heard of so many different forms of care for students, care for communities, care for the greater global world. And so I'm hopeful about the way that care grows and gets put into students and promoted in many ways.
I would say, if you haven't noticed, I think many Americans here are coming and feeling a little bit more relieved to see the positive conversations that are going on here, because we're feeling a little blue about engagement in the United States, right? And so actually coming and actually receiving some of the positive energy that COP brings, right? We have a long way to go, but actually also we are doing a lot of things, right? And it is a reminder to keep doing and to be more ambitious and to keep fighting. And I think that so coming to conferences like this, if just to fill up your cup and recharge is inspiring to me.
So I'm going to say two things, and I hope I'm really fast. So yesterday, the director of Tec de Monterrey is here at COP for the first time. So he's interested in this. He's here, and that gives me a lot of hope. And yesterday, he went to this panel of Mexican students, or like Mexican youth. They were talking, and the panel was it was the students' panel, but he was in the audience, and he asked a question about how can universities help students, do all the wonderful things they want to do. And oh my God, they had like a million things to say. I think there was a second panel after that question. They had so many ideas, and they just told him everything, like everything they wanted to see, everything they needed. He was really surprised about not everything they've done, but everything they want to do, and like the ideas they have, and like the very specific things they told him. So that was, it was a really cool moment. And then on the other hand, and this is going to sound maybe a bit grandiose for me to say, but this year we have the Higher Education for Climate Action Pavilion. I don't know if you've seen it. But it's been such a great collaborative effort. So it came together by we as observers applied for the pavilion, but we couldn't pay for the pavilion like that. So we just Universidad de Campinas, which is the Brazilian university, like came in and said we want this to happen, and they put in a lot of it, and then we just emailed about 120 universities and said we want this pavilion. Do you want to participate? It doesn't matter if you want to put $500 or $1,000 or more. And so right now the pavilion is sponsored by like 16 universities, but then we have events, like 66 events, and we have, I don't know, we haven't counted, but maybe more than 50 universities represented in that pavilion. And it has been such a collaborative effort. Like nobody is looking to gain more than the other. It's been just like with the best intentions. And it's been like a really great experience. And I hope if more things like that can happen where people, universities, just come together because they just want to come and talk and learn and have reflections around what this means without thinking about your own benefit. I think a lot more things could be done if everything was done in that way.
So, as I mentioned at the top, I've been to a number of these COPs, and I always come home, and I am anticipating coming home and feeling the same, which is that on the one hand, I am disappointed in these negotiations. They're insufficient. But on the other hand, I am so inspired to what you all have alluded to of the connections and the possibilities of the people you meet here within this space. And so while there are critiques about the size and scale of COPs and that sort of thing, I'm falling on the side of standing by it and saying, like, gosh darn it, we got to meet each other in person. We've got to connect. And this is where ideas get exchanged and new partnerships form on the sidelines. And that's so much more and so hard for anyone to measure in terms of the impact that we have when we get together in the same room. So that is the little piece of hope that I always come home from COP with, while also still holding this bigger challenge simultaneously. And just one thing to mention, if you are interested in seeing some of what I talked about today, tomorrow at 2 p.m. over in the Food Pavilion, which is just across the way, I'll be doing an inroads exercise, and we're going to be looking at healthy futures, talking about food, but also energy and a number of other dynamics. Please join me.
All right, well, thank you for all your hope. The addition I'll have is from the perspective of a student at the Fletcher School, which by its nature is very interdisciplinary. So we have people who study humanitarian affairs, stuff more on the war side. We have LLM students with us. And the hope I have is they're interested in climate and environment as well, even if it's not the focus of their studies. And you know, in the spirit of all this siloed discussion, I think people who would otherwise have been siloed before are starting to break down those silos and starting to take an interest in climate and the environment where they otherwise wouldn't have been. I saw the time signal, so I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you all for all of your words and insight. I'm very inspired from this, so I hope everyone else is as well. Thank you. Muito obrigada.
Do we get to pick with one?